now we're coming to Padshahi Mahima. It's a book written, like I've said, 500 years of Sikh history. So our history is so rich and so old that you literally combined in a one book. And we're just gonna talk about that, starting from, I would say, Pai Kabir ji, because ਭਾਈ ਕਬੀਰ ਜੀ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਵਿੱਚ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਤੁਕਾਂ
ਹਾਂਜੀ।
ਅਸੀਂ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ। ਸੋ ਕਬੀਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਦੇ ਟਾਈਮ 'ਤੇ ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਅਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਬੀਰ ਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਉਂ ਮੰਨਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਇਨ ਆਰ ਸਿੱਖ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ।
So if I can go back to what I said in the beginning, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਂ ਬਿਰਤਾਂਤ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ, ਬਿਰਤਾਂਤ meaning narrative. A lot of the books that were written about the Sikhs came from a very specific angle. I certainly felt this. And what they depicted was Sikhism, the religion. That this is what Sikhism is, and they kind of compartmentalized us into a particular worldview. That this is what they do. This is their Panch Kakar. They have 10 gurus. They bow to Guru Granth Sahib Ji. None of it was necessarily incorrect, but what I found was, in comparison to how the Sikhs were depicted by contemporaries of the gurus, there was something missing. And for me, that missing link was the political aspect of the Sikh movement. So a lot of times, what we found, especially in our recent itihas, is that historians try to break that connection. So there's a very famous. Some of your viewers and listeners might be aware of the work of Hugh MacLeod. He was a professor of Sikh studies back in the 70s, based primarily in New Zealand. And he was the first type of kind of professor or historian who basically said that the first 5 Guru Saiban, so Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj to like Guru Arjan Dev Ji tak, their ideology was separate. And he would have classified Bhagat Kabir Ji within that as well. That they were trying to portray something. But then the second set of 5 Guru Saiban, their ideology changed because of Guru Hargobind Sahib Padsha's creating the Akal Takht, and obviously the kind of the military aspect came about, which leads to the rise of the Khalsa by Guru Gobind Singh Ji. So there's small things we see within the narratives that are woven about our history. But again, when you go back to the Puratan sources, those written, prior to the British arriving, prior to the outside gaze, I guess, there's no distinction. This idea of miri piri within the Sikh world, we find that not only within what the gurus and the Sikhs were doing, but also the way in which Sikhi was being depicted. Again, by Gurdas Shri Avara, even Bansavli Nama. There's so many different resources that I could point towards. And obviously they're listed within the book as well. So firstly, it was to kind of, for me, revisit our history, but again, try to give it a more wholesome account, which considers both the spiritual aspect as well as the political, and doesn't really differentiate between the two, that this is more important. Now, obviously, anything that the Sikh do in terms of politically, so if you look at Maharaja Ranjit Singh Saraj, or the Misl Sardars before him, or Banda Singh Bahadur, everything that they're doing to better society is based off the gyan of the Guru, right? It's based off the inspiration they take from what the Gurus have done. But there was this kind of tendency to break that, that this all came afterwards. But when we look at the Guru's writings, like even, for example, Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj, they speak about, they say, Takht behe takhte ki laik. They're very outspoken about those who should be sitting on thrones, right? And they say that those who sit on thrones ought to be of a particular character. We know how outspoken they were against Babar for his invasion. That's recorded in Gurbani as well. We know how all the Guru Saiban were outspoken. But actually, what we sometimes miss is, and I think this is primarily because of the work of the non-Sikhs who have failed to understand what Sikhi was, because they've neglected these Puratan sources, is that there was no difference in the ideology of the Gurus, from Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj all the way to Guru Gobind Singh Ji. What we see is a development of the ideas.
Okay, so over here I will revert back to what you said earlier, ki first five gurus, the ideologies were different
Mhm.
than
Haji.
than the other five, the last five gurus, I would say,
Yeah.
right? So, what was their ideology? What was like first five gurus' ideology, and what was the rest of the gurus' ideology? What was the difference?
So what they say, what a lot of these kind of academics say is that Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj was a pacifist, or he was more about promoting peace and kind of almost kind of bordering the side of non-violence, which is more kind of associated with Buddhism, you could say, right? And then it changes after the Shahidi of Guru Arjan Dev Ji with what Guru Hargobind Sahib Pacha does. But again, what we see before that is, when we look at our historical sources, Guru Arjan Dev Ji Maharaj was in foreign lands trading for war horses prior to their Shahidi. Um, and the thing is, these kind of accusations that they make, we talked earlier about how history has been revised. When we look at the Mughal accounts, for example, of Bahadur Shah, even before Bahadur Shah, like even during Jahangir's time, the way in which they depict the Sikhs, even before like the armed struggle of the Akal Takht that comes up with Guru Hargobind Sahib Pacha, they use very derogatory language against the gurus, because what the gurus were doing was they were changing society, right? So even if you look at the Udasis of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, let's just go back to Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj. Why did Guru Nanak Dev Ji start the Udasis? ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਦਾਸੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਰੀਤ ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ, why did they do that? What was the need to go out into the world and do what they did? And actually, it comes up in Gurbani. Guru Nanak Dev Ji themselves, they say Gurmukh khojat pe udasi, that they went in search of the Gurmukhs. This comes up in Gurbani, Hana? So we know from our Itihas, they travel in all four directions over about a 22-year period. They go as far as Middle East, to the Middle East. They come back. But then what they do is, when they return to Punjab, one of the very first things that Guru Nanak Dev Ji does is they establish Kartarpur Sahib. Kartarpur Sahib becomes this kind of hub, this center of activity, from where then the Sikh revolution then takes form. And it's within Kartarpur Sahib we have this idea of Sangat first comes up, where people from all different walks of life, they come to seek guidance from the Guru. They obviously they obtain knowledge, they take gyan away. But what we're also seeing then is that that model is then developed by other Guru Sahiban. So when Guru Angad Dev Ji Maharaj comes in, they're then sent by Guru Nanak Dev Ji to go to Khadur Sahib and establish another town. Another town is then built. Guru Amar Das Ji goes to Govindwal Sahib, another town is established. Guru Amar Das Ji then also, takes it to the next step by sending out. They established the Manji system, and you may know this, but the Manji system was a system of basically representatives of the Guru's Darbar that would go out to do prachar on Sikhi. So they would travel far and wide. So there was twofold. One was to spread Sikhi, through prachar, and secondly, they collected dasband to bring it back into the Guru's Darbar to grow the Panth. And again, that system then became the Masan system under Guru Ram Das Ji Maharaj. They then themselves obviously established Amritsar Sahib, Taran Taran Sahib, Kiratpur, and eventually, we see it go all the way to Anandpur Sahib. So there's this unbroken kind of link between Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj and the establishment of the Guru's Darbar. Because Sikhi, I don't believe Sikhi could have grown with the speed and the way in which it did without having that base. You can think of other examples where you need to have that base, right? And then the examples of Sikh Raj that come afterwards were modeled on that idea. So that's what I meant by saying that these accusations that were thrown out there, that there was a difference in the ideology, that's a relatively new, you could say, colonial invention. When we look at our, Puratan Itihas, that which was recorded by contemporaries of the Gurus, there's this unbroken chain, and the ideology, remains the same from Pele Pacha to Dasve Pacha.